sind die Roots für den Jazz. Und da ihr in der Oberstufe seid, seid ihr des Englischen ja mächtig. Hoffe ich zumindest, weil der ganze Vortrag wird gleich auf Englisch sein. Das heißt, dass wirklich die Historie des Blues und natürlich auch wieder klausurrelevante Fragen werden mit dabei sein. Nils hat die beste Klausur ever schon entworfen für Jazz. Ich weiß auch die Lösung. Und für Blues wird es das natürlich auch geben. Ja, und dann würde ich jetzt im Grunde genommen mit einem... Ist soweit alles bei Lady? Okay, dann viel Spaß mit DGB. Applaus!
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. We are a travelling band that play all over the world, playing blues and blues rock music. We're called the DGB, which stands for the Danny Giles Band. My name's Danny. Hello. On the bass guitar, this is John. Say hi, John. And on the drums, this is Alan. Say yo. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about blues music and the history of blues and how the style developed to be the basis of pretty much all popular music and how it influenced everything into what we know today. Not everything, but it's one of the main roots of music today. So everything that you like, it might not be blues in the way that it sounds, but it's probably got some connection along the way. So blues music comes from America. It's African American music primarily. That's where it comes from. So it was born out of slavery when the slaves had nothing else but their voices. This was the first way that blues was expressed. So the chants and things that they would sing had a very, very particular sound. And then later on, they were given instruments or found instruments and that were Western instruments like guitars, harmonicas, brass instruments, all types of things, and then developed their own sound and their own style of playing. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I do, which is the guitar. So one of the first, earliest forms of blues was called the Delta Blues, which was from a part of America called the Mississippi Delta, where the Mississippi River lies. And this was a solo style. So most of the biggest artists from that time, and when we say artists, these people didn't really earn any money. It wasn't like it is today. This is a cultural thing. This was something that happened as an expression of oppression. And even within their own communities, these people were slightly outsiders. You know, they were considered to be outside of the church, which is where most of the music was. You know, that was what was the most acceptable in society, was church music, which is the same for us in Europe. It's the same root of things. And then there was secular music outside. So blues was what we call a secular music, a music that came from the people. Now, one of the most famous blues men was Robert Johnson. So that's a name that if you ever want to get into blues, this is one of the first people that you should check out. Robert Johnson recorded 29 songs. And if you listen to the original recordings, they're very, very kind of primitive, scratchy recordings. Old, his kind of sounds, you know, very, very early on, the first recordings possible. And it would be one guitar and one man singing in a room. So I'm going to take you through some of his style. So that's a little bit about Robert Johnson's guitar style. A lot of Robert Johnson's songs are kind of famous, but played by other people. And one of the most famous ones is like Sweet Home Chicago. Kind of vocal style, right? That's a little bit of the vocal style with the guitar parts. And it's all based around a very... How many... Do we have any musicians here? How many musicians here? Put your hands up. There has to be more than 2, 3. Who plays guitar? Yeah? There's a few guitar players here. So in music, we have structure. You have to have a structure. And before the Delta guys, and slightly after the Delta guys, what happened is people started to get together and play together. It wasn't just people on their own. So they had to come up with a system to know what everybody was doing. Otherwise, everybody got lost really quickly. So there was another really important part is the structure of the blues music, which is the 12-bar blues. So that's 12 groups of 4 beats. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. That makes, well, that was 2 bars. And there's a system of 12. And it goes round and round and round and round. And that's the basis of this music, is that if you can understand that structure, then you will understand how you build this style. So most songs in the blues are built around that. Now there were other styles, country blues, where people would play the chords and also an accompaniment. So the rhythm would be like a bass rhythm like this. country style, you know, when you have everything's happening, you have the talk. And the melody over the top. That was a little piece called Freight Train Blues. And it's kind of happier than the Delta sound. The Delta sound is a little bit more serious, and there was subject matters within the Delta blues that were kind of heavy because these people were going through some many hardships, so the lyrics would be quite dark. And Robert Johnson, the myth behind Robert Johnson is that he sold his soul and he became a really good guitar player. He went down to the crossroads. He apparently turned up one day to play some guitar with some other guys, and he really wasn't very good. And the guys kind of laughed at him and said, you know, come back when you've learned how to play. And the legend has it that he came back maybe like 6 months later and he was the best guitar player anybody had ever heard within a very short space of time. Probably was a little bit longer than 6 months in reality, but these stories are always good, right? So the story was he went down to the crossroads, this is how he sings the song, and he got down on his knees and he asked the Lord for mercy because he was about to sign his life away to become the best guitar player possible. So there's lots of folklore within this music as well around that time. Things started to change when people stopped working in fields as slaves in the South, and they kind of migrated to Chicago and started to work in industrial towns and started to actually get paid jobs. And electricity was becoming a big thing in music. You know, electric guitars were becoming really popular. And people thought that this kind of music that I've just been playing was very, very old-fashioned. And also, people didn't want to be reminded of the old plantations and all this kind of thing. You know, it became very much a music that the people, African American people, didn't really want to hear anymore. They wanted to hear something exciting, something new, something cool. So I'm going to give you an example now with the band as to what started to happen. 2 seconds. So the electric guitar happened. And some of them, and then once people started playing electric, a whole new sound came around, which was known to be the Chicago blues sound. Which early on started to sound, when it started, it sounded a little bit like the old country blues. But eventually developed into its own thing. And it was louder, it was more party music, but it was also had the same roots as the deep blues of the South. And here's a little song by a guy called Muddy Waters, who was one of the kings of the Chicago blues sound. beginning of the Chicago blues sound, which is kind of cool. Now there was another guy that started coming up in the blues who was traveling around America in a big bus with his name on the side of it. And this is the old way of promoting your band, which is something that we'd like to have, a big bus with our name on it, but we can't afford one. We don't have enough money. And what it had was B.B. King's Blues Band. And it travelled all over America playing hundreds and hundreds of shows all over the place, from town to town to town to town. And then again, round and round and round. And this guy did this for his whole life. You know, pretty much his entire life. And his name was B.B. King, which was a nickname, Blues Boy. And his style was very, very up and good times, and had a big band. We only have the three of us today, so we can't really demonstrate all of BB's sound. But we're going to give it a little go and give you a little flavour of what BB was doing with the blues at that time. I can see. Yeah. Tim. Thank you. So, something happened. Like, blues was still at this point not really recognised worldwide. It was really much confined to African American people. These were the only audience really that were interested in this, because in America it had its some bad problems with segregation and all these political things that were going on, and again, very, very oppressive culture at this time. And there were separate radio stations for this music, and there were some very, very horrible terms like race music that were used in those times to describe what this was, which was just, bad parts of history, which, there are lots of. And the blues was almost forgotten. It was almost kind of like it disappeared, because there was nowhere to go. Rock and roll happened in the 50s, which was an evolution of blues music. People like Chuck Berry took the blues sound and sped it up and made it fast and did things like this. Happened, right? Which was the blues. It's the same thing. It was just faster. It was faster and it was exciting. And America went wild for this thing, and the whole world changed when rock and roll happened. But the blues, again, it was like something that people were trying to kind of forget and brushed under the carpet, so to speak. And rock and roll kind of made it acceptable because it was pop music, and it was for everybody. Then something happened in the 60s, which was very strange. In the UK, lots of guys that were at art college and kind of doing this kind of thing, they'd left school, they came from quite wealthy backgrounds, they was not poor, they were from what we would call a middle class background, discovered this blues music because they were looking for new things, and they found this American folk music and were like, whoa, what's this? We've found this style that seems like it's been forgotten about. We're going to form bands. We're going to get bands together and do our own version of this. And that was the beginning of what we call the British blues movement, the British blues boom, and it just went crazy. And one of the biggest bands to come out of that is the biggest rock and roll band of all time, the Rolling Stones. And what happened is the Rolling Stones took this music, turned it into pop music, made it their own, and basically gave all the respect to the original guys from America, and just told everybody, look, this isn't our music, this is where it comes from, and this is where we got our influences from. And they put a lot of money and help back to get these guys new careers, which are kind of like getting towards the end. They never thought they'd have another shot. Guys like Muddy Waters. So we wouldn't have heard of any of these blues guys, John Lee Hooker, B.B. King, if it wasn't for bands like the Rolling Stones, because America was not interested in this stuff. They didn't even know about it. It was something they didn't really know about. It was their own music, but they had no idea because it had been kept a secret for so long. And the Rolling Stones were like, check this out. This is your music. You should need to celebrate this. You need to do something with it. So they were going to play some British blues and Mr. Principal. Please join us. Silence? we go. We're going to get serious now. So we're not going to play a Rolling Stones song. We're going to play, first of all, a song by a band called Fleetwood Mac. And this is a song that they wrote, a blues song called Black Magic Woman. Got a black magic woman. Got a black magic woman. I got a black magic woman. Got me so blind I can see. I got a black magic woman. She's gonna make it dead. Won't put a spell on me, baby. So shortly after that period, British blues music turned into something called blues rock music, was where rock music and blues combined. And there were bands like Cream, which featured a guy called Eric Clapton, who was a very famous guitar player. and a guy called Jimi Hendrix, who came over from America and spent most of his time in London, created this new sound of blues rock, you know, this heavy blues rock sound, and Fleetwood Mac were part of that too, but I think Cream and Jimi Hendrix took it up another level and made it really intense. Now, one of Cream's most famous tracks, like in blues all the time, was somebody else's song. You know, this is the tradition of the music, is that you play other people's songs and then you play them your own way. And they actually were famous for playing a Robert Johnson song all the way back to the 1920s, but they turned it into a rock song. It was called Crossroads, the one I told you about where he went and sold his soul to the devil. And then they made their own version, and we're going to play it for you right now. So yeah, then rock music really happened, and then bands took influence from Cream, like bands like Led Zeppelin, and they made it louder and harder, and then, you know, rock music just evolved from there. So everything that we know about rock guitar, rock music, anything, all stems from the blues. That's where it all comes from. It all grew from there. I suppose we've not got too much time left, so what we're going to do is we're going to play some of our music, which is, you know, we've been kind of blues influenced and written quite recently. And this is what we do. We continue that whole thing. And hope you enjoy some of our songs. So before we end, thank you everybody. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for listening. All right. another song from our album. It's called Shiver. do when we're working and when we're out working on the road. This is what we call our merchandise stand, which is really an inventive name for selling stuff. And please go and help yourself to a tour poster, and we'll give them away. We're giving them away free. If you want one, go and grab one. So, thanks very much. Be good to each other.
Many thanks. I hope to see us later. Next year, perhaps you will come back and hear us tour. I hope so. So, jetzt noch eine Ankündigung auf Deutsch. Also, ihr habt wahrscheinlich ja toll mitbekommen, dass dort ein Merchandising-Stand ist und ihr wisst, Musikerinnen und Musiker leben nicht nur von Luft und Liebe. Die freuen sich über Spenden, wie ihr gemerkt habt, wir haben euch kein Geld abgeknappt. Ihr könnt dort sogar ein Tourplakat bekommen, die sind in limitierter Sache da. Und natürlich kann man auch CDs erwerben, also ein echter Merchandising-Stand, also da dürft ihr euch gleich gerne noch aufhalten und euch Plakate holen. Dann natürlich organisatorisch, eure betreuenden Lehrkräfte sind nochmal da, um zu checken, ob ihr auch immer noch da seid. Und ihr kennt das Spielchen schon, wie nach dem Jazzkonzert. Ihr bitte schnell die Stühle übereinander stellen und dem netten Herrn Schröder zuleiten. Ich hoffe, es hat euch gefallen. Genießt noch die Zeit, kommt zum Merchandising-Stand noch einen schönen Tag und ich hoffe, die Überraschung ist gelungen. Die Stühle bitte in Elfer rein, also bis 11 zählen, in Elfer rein. Bis 5, wie viel? 15, wir erhöhen auf 15 und dann da oben hinstellen. 15er rein und dann hinstellen. Dankeschön.